Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Fullback Dive brought to you by the good people at the Roto Street Journal, paving your way to fantasy glory, acting as your lead blocker to fantasy excellence, making all your football-related fantasies come true. I'm your host, Nat the Truth Jones. With me, as always, the Wolf of Roto Street himself, as well as Mo, who is this is our first time running together this year, but we did a couple last year. And this is actually the second time we're trying to do this because we had a earlier failed attempt and we had technical difficulties, but we're back. And hopefully the people that were tuned in 10 minutes ago are going to rejoin us because this is going to be a great episode. We're talking 2024 fantasy football busts. Obviously, we refer to them as landmines from time to time. You take them and you just regret it and you hate yourself for the entire year because either they get hurt or even worse, they get rolled out there and they're just plain terrible. So we're going to go over those. They're each going to give us one from each position. We're also going to touch a tiny bit on their picks from 2023. Spoiler alert, they did pretty well. I think they hit 6 out of 8 between them. So we're going to talk about those as well. Wolf, how you doing?
Doing well. As you alluded to, this is definitely one of the most important, but often overlooked. Everyone loves the glory of a great sleeper, of making the right value picks, but it is just as important, if not more so, to not land on those. I love the word landmine. I think it's a great way to describe it. In these early rounds, especially, you'll notice a trend with these picks. We're not just going out there and saying, the quarterback 29 on the rankings is going to suck. No, we're going in there. We're going hard. We did that last year. And as you said, we had some pretty good success picking out those first 5 or so rounders that ultimately did not pan out. For drafters, we got a lot of the big ones right last year. So I'm excited to dive in. My man Mo definitely nailed a few big ones. You ready to get a few more here, Mo, this year?
Oh, I'm back. The pessimist in me has got me fired up for this. I don't know what it is, but something about just the players that you should not be drafting. It gets me excited. Maybe it was the success that we had last year, but I'm excited to rattle off some names, hear what you've got to say, and then hear what the truth has to say about what we're offering up.
Yeah, I got some opinions. Real quick before we get started, barring injury, I'm not talking about injury here. Who are the guys that you picked last year that you hated yourself for the second you had them on your team? Just hated watching them be rolled out all year. Mo, you first, and then the Wolf, and then we'll get started.
Well, I think, honestly, I'm thankful that I didn't have to watch him get rolled out all year. Cam Akers got benched relatively quickly. Not even benched, cast off. Didn't last the season with the Rams. I was a very, very much, unfortunately, a Cam Akers tout last year. Was very big on the role that he was going to be given by Sean McVay, and bought into the whatever 6-7 game sample we got at the end of the season before, and completely bought in and was taking him there in the 5th round. And obviously it came back to bite me in the ass. Thankfully, I had Wolf to help me recover. He was talking up Kyren Williams throughout the back half of the offseason, and I was able to grab him on some best ball teams and pick him up on waivers in some of my redraft leagues where I needed to scramble after I realized that my Cam Akers pick was dust.
Wolf, I know you had J.K. Dobbins. That was a heartbreaker. Who's someone you picked that just made you just feel awful every day?
Yeah, it was probably him. And that was a tricky one to even call a bust just because the first half of the game, he looked great. He was flying around. We saw Gus Edwards score like 13 touchdowns in the offense. So it's tough to – I want to think of like the guy that I just had to like keep rolling out but just kept pissing me off and I couldn't bench him. It's not coming to mind. Dobbins is the one that was just like a heartbreaker last year with that Achilles tear. He was set up for such a good season, didn't make it through the first game. And I started to load up on him everywhere in my late drafts. So thankfully, as most of Kyren Williams, a big recovery for both of us because I had him. I actually drafted him in most of my leagues as my last pick. And that kind of outweighed the Dobbins impact for sure. But yeah, definitely Dobbins is the one that jumps to mind as, damn, that one, like I wish I had him all year type of situation.
Yeah, well, sure. All right. Well, if you got, we're going to probably be on 45 minutes or an hour. If somebody else comes to you, just throw it out there. For some reason, I'm a little bit like Mo in this. I actually find this topic super interesting. All right, let's get into 2023 real fast. You guys each had a pick for who you thought was going to be a bust at quarterback. Wolf, you picked Deshaun Watson, and I agreed with you wholeheartedly at the time, and you came off looking really smart on that one. He was legitimately terrible. You had Dak Prescott as your honorable mention. That was a little bit less. Although at the beginning of the year, he was terrible. I mean, just completely awful. Then as we talked about in the top 12 thing, CeeDee Lamb blew up, Dak Prescott blew up. So second half, not as good. But Deshaun Watson was a great pick. Mose was interesting. Coming off the top rope with this one, he picked Patrick Mahomes. It's just kind of like, it's like rubbing against the grain. You think that sounds crazy, but how do you think those turned out, guys?
Phenomenal. I mean, Deshaun Watson was going as a top 10 guy, did not pan out at all. But I think the Mose one is an important one to highlight too, because as we get into our 2024 picks, it wasn't that, I don't mean to speak for you, Mo, but it's not like you didn't like Mahomes as a player. It was more so where he was going. He was the QB1. He was going about a round earlier than Josh Allen. And so we have and of course he ended up finishing like QB12 on the season. And it was a phenomenal pick to say the QB1 is not going to outperform not only just these top three guys, but barely be a QB1 on the year. So that one landed huge. And we have a few on this list that fall similarly. I even have, a top 3 ranked guy at a position as a plus, just because I don't love his cost. We're going to get to him later. So that's a kind of important thing to think through with these busts as well. It's not necessarily we don't like the player. We don't think they're talented. Some of them even like their fantasy outlooks. We just think they're priced a little too high for what we expect to get from them.
100%. I'll victory lap the Mahomes take here for a second. The price was just simply egregious last year, going at the 1-2 turn. And just how are you drafting a quarterback that early in the second round of drafts? He was like a staple of between pick 15 and 20. And the way I summed it up last year, you can go back and watch on the show. I mean, basically, I didn't see that he had a significantly greater chance than any of these other guys to finish as the QB1 overall, yet he was being drafted so aggressively. And I also pointed out that the offense was rather fragile. So it was basically just a 33-year-old tight end, maybe a 32 last year, but 30-plus-year-old tight end. And they're trying to make him the focal point of the offense while losing several key pieces. It was a recipe for disaster in Kansas City last year, and I am glad that I steered clear basically in every single league. I didn't have a single share of Patrick Mahomes in any of my redraft leagues last year, and it ended off paying off pretty well. And we highlighted on the Best Ball show the other day. I was a Josh Allen guy, but enough of the victory lapping last year. Who are you feeling about, or what are you thinking about this year's quarterback class? Who are you fading this year?
Yeah, this is actually, starting from the jump, my scariest fade. This one makes me lose sleep at night, so maybe I shouldn't be fading him quite as hard as I currently am. That's Anthony Richardson, quarterback for the Colts. Going right now, the end of round 4, very early round 5, a 48 to 50 ADP, depending where you draft. If he goes to round 6, I will just kind of preface it. If he goes to round 6, I am happy to hammer him. I have done that plenty in best ball. I've had some people drafting already early saying, hey, Richardson's still there. I know you said you didn't like him in your guide. Should I take him? Yeah, in round 6, absolutely. But it is that opportunity cost. Why is it such a scary fade, though? We know the upside. He could truly break fantasy. This is the most freakish athlete to ever play quarterback. 6'4", 244 pounds. 4.4340, 40.5-inch vertical. Don't know why you need that at a quarterback, but still just emphasizes this guy's speed, explosiveness, freakish athleticism. A Lamar Jackson mixed with a Cam Newton. And we saw those gifts actually being put to good use. It wasn't just a combine warrior. It was only 2.5 games of action. We'll get to why that's a concern in just a sec. But in 2.5 games, 4 rushing touchdowns. He was on pace for over 20 rushing touchdowns on the season. And those accuracy concerns, only 53.8% completion percentage in college, that was improved. 60% completion rate as a pro. Not stellar, not something you want to hang your hat on, but certainly better than he was in college. So how could I possibly be out on a phenom like this? Well, it really does boil down to injuries, and I know that can be a fool's errand. We know that you look at Christian McCaffrey, was injury prone for the last couple of years, and then boom, he hasn't missed a game in 2 straight seasons. But Richardson, just you think about the nature of the way he plays, suffers a concussion, then a season-ending shoulder injury. Both of those came on designed runs, and again, only 2.5 games to suffer those 2 types of serious injuries. Are we really that confident he's going to make it through a full season? And maybe they do dial back the run a little bit less with him as a result. It's their franchise quarterback. They're going to want to get a look at this guy, but that's also what would make him so special. Thankfully, Shane Steichen is saying, he compared him to Steph Curry. Do you not want Steph Curry to shoot threes? When he asked if they're going to let Richardson run. So I do imagine they are. And so, of course, that's why you're drafting him. That's the fantasy goodness, the Konami code, as we like to call it. That also, I think, does put him up to more susceptible risk. And there is just the issue of these. Yeah, he improved as a passer. Still was a 56.5 PFF passer grade. Was one of the bottom 3 starters in the league. And then you read some of the latest training camp buzz. It's not pretty. I know they're having joint practices with your Bengals over there, Mo, and he's just throwing to spot, says safety Geno Stone. He doesn't even see his receivers. Is all he does is run, said cornerback Cam Britt Taylor. The D-line saying, throw the ball, bro, because they were like there in his face trying to tackle him, but they're like, we can't tackle you. It's joint practice. And then he's just standing there looking around, not reading the field. And then the report continued that in the 2-minute drill, he got sharper, and all training camp, it's been a little bit of an up and down. And that's how it's probably going to be this year. But I just look at this. Late round 4, I'd rather just go around earlier on Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, maybe even dip into Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. Or if I'm going to go in this range, I feel like in redraft especially, I probably just prefer a guy like CJ Stroud, who I think has real 5,000, 40K upside. If I really want that mobility, I want the Konami upside, why not go Jaden Daniels in round 9 right now, who actually averaged 4 more fantasy points on just his rushing production when you compare the two as college athletes. So to me, it's just a matter of price. I can understand this guy's going to break fantasy, but for that price, that risk seems too great. I'd rather either get the sure thing around earlier or go a little bit later with somebody who I think can do just as much damage, if not more, because he's a better passer, in Jaden Daniel.
Yeah, I can't get behind this one all the way. I voluntarily, like, I understand why. The injury stuff and the probably not that good of a passer. I just choose to put my blinders on and see the 6'4", 255 pounder who ran a 4.4 at the 40 or at the combine. And I put my blinders on and say, yep, this guy could be the QB1. And you just see what he did on the ground. It's just, I understand that it's a small sample size and we might be drafting this guy too aggressively, but Cam Newton established that this mold of quarterback can be a perennial top 5 contender, top 5 quarterback. And he's not like at a value where you're like, have to buy. But it's enough for me to still be interested. But I completely get the reason. So I'm not going to give you a ton of pushback. I don't agree.
I like Shane Steichen too. Like I get it. There is a lot of juice here, and that's what we're going here for. Though we're not going to sit here and just pick all unsexy names and call them busts, But I just think that the risk is a little bit. I mean, the reward could be huge too. So yeah, the risk probably is worth the reward. Certainly, if it hits. I count me skeptical. This guy makes it through 17 games. I'll be eating crow. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, mine is a little, like you said, we're not going to be fading unsexy quarterbacks. Mine's a little bit unsexy. He's drafted as a fringe starter. Purdy comes off the board as the QB 11 in terms of consensus ADP. And I see no reason to select Brock Purdy around pick 100 this year. We're talking about a guy who finished as the QB6 last season in arguably the most efficient season of all time from a quarterback. And that, in my opinion, the QB6 outcome is the absolute ceiling outcome for Brock Purdy, considering what kind of season he had last year. Let's just run through some of the efficiency stats from Purdy last year. Second in fantasy points per dropback, only behind Josh Allen for a minimum of 250 dropbacks. You'll hear that your boy Anthony Richardson was the leader in fantasy points per dropback, but that was a very limited sample. So of qualified quarterbacks, Purdy was second. A 7% TD rate for Purdy, meaning he threw a touchdown pass on 7% of his throws. That has only been accomplished 13 times in the last decade. He posted 9.6 yards per attempt, the highest mark of all time for any quarterback with at least 350 attempts. He was first in fantasy points over expected among quarterbacks per fantasy points data. He threw 10 more touchdowns than expected last season. And he did all this on 487 dropbacks, which was the fewest number of any quarterback who played the full season. It's just insane, the level of efficiency that we got out of Brock Purdy last year. It was arguably the most efficient quarterback season of all time. And I really don't think, I'm obviously have not dove into the efficiency of every other quarterback season in recent memory, but I would be hard pressed to believe that you would find a better fantasy quarterback in recent years other than this season that we got out of Brock Purdy. And like I said, he did all this on a very few dropbacks. The 49ers offense is a run-first offense. I mean, why wouldn't you be with a left tackle like Trent Williams who can lead the charge and a running back like Christian McCaffrey? Not to mention the fact that they're just an insanely good team, good offense all around, playing with the lead all the time. No need for Brock Purdy to drop back 35, 45 times a game and huck the ball over the field. They can get it done on the ground. And then besides that, I mean, he just offers little to nothing as a rusher. 144 yards on the ground. He's just a complete statue in the pocket, and just he's getting there on ridiculous efficiency, a high touchdown number, and I just see regression in his future, and it's just not an upside play at all. When you consider the other guys who are going around him, he goes right ahead of Jaden Daniels, who I think has a far higher ceiling than Brock Purdy. I think just to get it out there, I think Brock Purdy is going to be a QB1 this year, but a middling QB1 at best. QB8, QB10, QB12 at best, just given the regression that I expect. Take the chance on Jaden Daniels. He goes ahead of Xavier Worthy on ESPN, does Brock Purdy. Take Xavier Worthy and address quarterback later. Speaking of a quarterback you can address later, you can get Trevor Lawrence 50 picks later on ESPN. You can wait a good 4 rounds and just grab Trevor Lawrence. And I think that they have just similar projections, similar baseline outcomes, because I'm, you know me, I'm very much all over the Jacksonville offense, but these are guys who are just going to throw for 30 touchdowns this year. And I think that Trevor Lawrence is just the same sort of pick as Brock Purdy, but you can make it 50 picks later and you can just wait on the quarterback position. Lawrence is going to be a guy who I hope is a top 10 guy. I think Purdy has a similar range of outcomes, but you don't have to take him right at pick 100.
And you got some Twitter love there. Great Purdy take from Sam Stein here commenting on in. I love the take. I think it makes total sense. All this crazy efficiency. Can we really expect it, or should we just expect natural regression? The only counter to consider is just Kyle Shanahan. Is he just that good? Is this offense just that big of a cheat code? And it might just be because consistently we saw Jimmy Garoppolo leading the NFL in yards per attempt, despite it all being dink and dunk down the field. It's the only thing to consider.
Yeah, but if that's what he's doing, if the QB6 season is when he has the most efficient quarterback season like in recent history, I'll pass. Like, I don't think he's going to have that level of efficiency. Like, yes, he will likely, because of the Shanahan scheme, be a highly, highly efficient quarterback. But the levels that we saw last year, no chance. And if that absolute ceiling outcome is QB6, pass.
Yeah. But you also mentioned too, like Jaden Daniels goes around 2 later. Certainly more upside there. I'd rather take him. It does look like Truth has regained his internet. So welcome back on in, Truth. We just wrapped up the quarterbacks. Everything okay over there?
Everything's okay. I'm sorry. I missed your entire Anthony Richardson argument. We came in for the tail end of the Purdy take. I like, obviously he's going to, Mo is not moved by the efficient numbers that Purdy might put up. He's not looking for a Sam Bradford type season. And I definitely can respect that take. But yeah, I'm back, and sorry for any delay on my part. Good takes on the quarterbacks from what I heard.
Absolutely. We're getting some great comments on in here, too, reminding me of some of the terrible busts from last year. We'll definitely pull some of those up when we get to the mailbag in just a little bit, but love to see some regulars. And Charlie, Omar, definitely get if anybody else has some busts from last year that are traumatizing, or Allen Robinson from 2 years ago. I see you saying,
oh,
Charlie.
God.
Yeah. I mean, I still lose sleep over Allen freaking Robinson. That was a tough one that year. But all you guys out there, if you do mind hitting that thumbs up button, you like what you're hearing, the likes, the shares, the retweets, it does truly help us grow, get out to more people. So if you want to help the show out, it's a free, easy way to do it, and we would greatly, greatly appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for that. I had forgotten about the Allen Robinson take. So.
Yeah. You can have another sleepless night tonight, dear Truth.
Yeah. Also, Omar in the comments said Dameon Pierce, which I was like, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely one.
I also remember that well. All right, let's get into running back. Speaking of Dameon Pierce, neither of you guys had him as your bust for last year, although that would have been a great pick. But you both actually had great picks anyway. Wolf came in with Josh Jacobs, and Mo came in with another one, kind of a Mahomes-esque pick. He picked Austin Eckler, who was very near the top of a lot of guys' running back boards. And you both ended up looking okay, right?
Yeah, both of those ended up busting in a pretty hard way. I don't think there's any that should have been the answer last year was Austin Eckler. I had him in quite a few leagues, including my most important one, and he was the bust of the year. He had a top 6 pick, and ultimately was you had to play him when he came back from the injury, and it was just so painful to watch him. Those are the worst type of busts where you can't even bench him, but he's not going to be good. So yeah, I think Mo nailed that one, and Jacobs, he totally floundered, worse efficiency than Zeke, and didn't put up any any type of production. So I think we got a couple more good ones here this year, but yeah, we nailed it last year for sure.
All right. So for the picks for 2024, Wolf comes in with Travis Etienne. That one's interesting because we had it out with the Duck last year. on a pod about him, and we were just like, "You're an idiot." And then we kind of ended up looking like idiots. Well, you're going back to the well, and I love it. And then Mo's coming in with Saquon Barkley. I'm interested to hear this take because I said from a football standpoint, I didn't understand the Barkley pickup at all for the money they spent, anything like that. But I'm interested to hear the anti-fantasy argument that Mo's going to give us. Let's start with the Wolf, and let's start with Travis Etienne, a guy that we seemingly love to hate. And right now we're a little bit of a hole with him. So hopefully you can dig us out.
We were in a little bit of a hole, but you look at the second half of last year, it doesn't look like we got as much pie on our face as you probably think. Now, he did finish as the running back 3, so fading him after a solid season definitely seems risky here. And Tank Bigsby, I do think, is maybe the worst running back in the NFL, at least last year's Tank Bigsby. But yet all the offseason talk has been, we want to reduce Travis Etienne's role. They even cited out Tank Bigsby in short yardage and goal-to-go opportunities as potentially being a spot to relieve him. And thus far in camp, for whatever it's worth, Bigsby is apparently a lot more explosive, seems to have his legs under him more than he ever had last year, which he couldn't get much worse. But ultimately, it sounds like Bigsby, if you watch the preseason, he does look like he's churning at a different pace than what we saw last year. So I look at this and I see a guy in Etienne, first 8 weeks, unbelievable. Running back 2 in fantasy, only Christian McCaffrey outscoring him, 18.8 half PPR points per game, top 12 in 6 of 8 games. I mean, you were just that's why I was like, Duck is just murdering us right now by telling us we're idiots to fade him. But then you look at the second half, and right after those first 8 weeks, a dramatic drop-off, 11.4 points per game, nearly 7 points less than what he was doing beforehand in just 2 top 12 games. 22% of the rest of the way were top 12. So definitely a far cry. This was the running back 16 over that span. So now it does seem like, coming in at running back 8, right there in the middle. So is it we're going to get an exact middle of that? Maybe. But with all this talk about taking away work, he was so dependent on the volume, playing over 80% of the snaps in nearly every single one of those games and monopolizing the work. And soon, by the second half of the year, it wasn't Tank Bigsby, but they had to get somebody. Dearness Johnson was mixing in there and stealing touches. I don't want to put any shame on that guy's name. He was the man.
We love Dearness Johnson.
We love Dearness over here. But still, if Etienne is truly going to break fantasy and justify a second-round price, you can't be ceding work to anybody, never mind Dearness Johnson, Tank Bigsby. So I definitely prefer Devon Achane. Anybody that's watched the show knows that we are huge Achane guys here. Anybody that's read the draft guide knows we are obsessed with him. Way much more break up fantasy upside, going nearly a full round later. If you wanted to dip in the round 2 running back pool instead of just waiting for Achane, well, I love Isaiah Pacheco without McKinnon. 2 guys you can go after, but still so much other talented receiver. I just don't think Etienne is worth the cost at all in round 2. I am worried about that second half drop off. I'm worried about this being more of a timeshare than people expect, despite being a nice talent himself.
So, Mo, when we talk about Saquon Barkley, and I got cut off before I really got to finish my point about your Mahomes pick, which is, the Wolf had said, we love him as a football player, and the guy won the Super Bowl. He's almost certainly the best quarterback in the NFL, one of the best all time already, and yet he was a fringe fantasy starter at best. So your pick was excellent. We don't really doubt, or maybe you do. I doubt you do. You don't doubt Saquon Barkley's ability, his kind of pedigree as a running back. But why don't you like him in fantasy this year for where he's going?
Yeah, I did it last year with the Eckler pick. I got ridiculed for coming off the top rope, not fading Austin Eckler, and I'm going to do it once again with Saquon Barkley. It's just not worth it at the back end of the first round at all. Give me his teammate A.J. Brown. Give me Garrett Wilson. If you desperately, for some reason, need to go running back in that spot, which I understand, go Jonathan Taylor instead. There's just several competent and quality options that I think should be drafted ahead of Saquon Barkley. But let me get into my reason why. Just looking back in these last couple of seasons, Saquon Barkley's fantasy value has been primarily driven by his role as the one-man show for the Giants. I mean, you just kind of look at their receiving core. It was completely ugly in these last couple of years. You've got names like Wandale Robinson, Isaiah Hodgins, just Kadarius Toney was there for what was it, a year and a half, but it's just absolutely dog ugly in terms of like their weapons. Darren Waller was supposed to be the solution to the passing game, and he didn't work out. So as a result, Barkley ranks top 5 in touches per game and weighted opportunities per game in each of the last 2 seasons, and he almost hit. It was like 79.5 in each of the last 2 years snap share. So almost hitting an 80% snap share in each of the last 2 years. And that's just massive. We know that opportunity is what drives value for running backs in fantasy football. And I just don't see him hitting either of those marks in terms of the top 5 in touches per game or an 80% snap share in Philadelphia this year. I mean, just in terms of just the overall offense, far more competition for touches. And I hear people talking about why would they sign Saquon Barkley to give all this, to not give him a bunch of touches. I mean, why would you not funnel your offense through AJ Brown and Devonta Smith? I mean, that is just a completely sane argument. I just don't see the path for Saquon Barkley getting the 20 touches a game or playing 80% of snaps. So just in terms of overall volume, I think Saquon Barkley is going to see a massive hit, and we know what kind of value overall volume provides. And then in terms of the most important touches that he may not see now that he's in Philadelphia, I see a potential hit come into his red zone usage as well as his usage as a receiver. So specifically regarding targets, we know that a target is worth more than 2.5 times the value of a rushing attempt. And I just don't think he's going to be used as a receiver as much as we're used to. In general, Philadelphia isn't a team or an offense that has utilized running backs in the passing game. In 2022, they ranked dead last, 32nd in running back target share. And last year, with a pretty reasonably talented receiving back in DeAndre Swift, they ranked 16th in running back target share, so completely league average. And then I got to shout out Jacob Gibbs for these next couple of stats. A great follow on Twitter. In the last 4 years, in the Jalen Hurts era, the targets per route run numbers for running backs in Philadelphia, the league average, so not including Philadelphia and all other 32 teams, 18.9% targets per route run for running backs. In running backs playing with Jalen Hurts, 15.9%. And then in running backs playing for Kellen Moore, 17.5%. So below league average in both of those marks in terms of targets per route run for running backs. So you don't expect to see running backs used as receivers in those offenses. And then in terms of just the overall role for running backs in these offenses commanded by Jalen Hurts, it just hasn't been particularly valuable. The Philadelphia running back expected fantasy points per game in 2021 RB33, in 2022 RB26, in 2023 RB24. So it's just been middling RB2, RB3 production out of these running backs in terms of their overall role and their overall value. And I just don't see Saquon Barkley getting there. It's setting up to be a situation where he loses out on the most valuable touches that he's been seeing throughout his career in New York, and he doesn't need to be the offensive focal point anymore. They've got competent weapons beside him. They don't need to force feed Saquon Barkley with a ton of touches. And I get that he can be more efficient this year, but I just don't see this price paying off at the back of round 1. I'd rather go somewhere else namely a receiver in Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown. JT if you have to, but I'm just avoiding Saquon Barkley because of his usage as a receiver and his usage at the goal line. And it's pretty clear cut for me.
I agree with both of your takes completely. I will not be touching either of these guys where they are currently being drafted, which is extremely high, and their auction values, of course, are going to be extremely high as well. I'm not interested, and from a football standpoint, I don't understand why the Eagles moved off DeAndre Swift just basically for the privilege of paying like a ton more money for a guy that's – I mean, I don't know. I don't see him as a huge improvement in that area for whatever it's worth. Wolf, you agree with the Barkley pick?
Yeah, I do. And you kind of hinted to the goal line volume, but the tush push is really the big thing here, too. And we saw DeAndre Swift, how many times he got vultured. It's the ultimate vulture in fantasy. It's a great play, and maybe with Kelsey not there, it goes more to the running back. But he handpicked his successor there at center. That I think they're going to definitely continue to pound it in. My only concern is, what if it is just like this line is so much better? The top graded line of last year, number 2 in PFF's preseason ranking compared to the 30th ranked offensive line last year. I mean, it could be that big of a dramatic turnaround that Barkley just finds space he's never seen. And we see a Barkley we've never seen. So I I do dabble just a little bit at the end of round one if Taylor's gone, especially because running back does thin out pretty big. Would you even go, Mo? Would you go like Devon Achane at the end of round one in redraft leagues over Barkley? Because that's a tricky debate for me.
That's definitely pushing it. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably just grab receiver instead. I guess this is kind of a cop out to the question, but yeah, I would probably just go neither and take either Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown. I'm not willing to push Achane into round one. I think that's a bit too aggressive for a guy who is almost 100% going to be a committee back. And even if Mostert gets hurt, he will still be a committee back. He's just not a bell cow whatsoever. It's just a pure efficiency bet. So I'm just going receiver there, but I won't be touching Saquon with a 10-foot pole at cost. I grab him here and there in our best ball drafts that we've been doing. He'll slide to the end of round 2 sometimes, and I'll grab him there just in the outcome where I'm wrong and he does go off in this Eagles offense. I want to have a little bit of him, but end of round 1, it's an easy fade for me. And we didn't even talk about Will Shipley and Kenny Gainwell, like supposedly like taking away touches in the preseason. It's it's seeming like they're going to have some sort of role. And that's kind of what I was alluding to with him not getting an 80% snap share. The Eagles understand that they can win football games without Saquon Barkley being out there for every single play and handling every single touch. They can get it done in other ways. And we know that Kellen Moore is capable of putting together a pretty potent passing attack. So I don't think the Eagles are going to have to rely on Saquon Barkley as heavily as some people expect them to.
Yeah, a lot of people point to that contract and are like, oh, they're going to have to use him because they gave him so much money. Or it's like, we gave him this much money to put us over the hump in the playoffs, kind of that, not a Travis Kelce level of like saving the playoffs, but maybe they do have Gainwell. It could go either way with that contract. I don't think that's a guarantee you're going to use the guy. But truth, you had asked me earlier in the show, who's my worst pick of last year. I was like, Dobbins comes to mind because of how traumatic it was. But then I really must have been trying to black out my actual worst pick of last year. And talking about the Giants unearthed it. Daniel Jones. I mean,
there you go. There we go.
I could not have been more into Daniel Jones last year. Far and away by my worst call maybe of all time was Daniel Jones last year and how into him I was. Oh my God.
Do you remember? So first of all, you're completely right. And I can't believe either one of us didn't come up with that until now. If you remember with Daniel Jones, I talked you down a little bit. Yeah. Like, I mean, it was actually going to be even worse.
I know. And Daniel Jones here. I was like, it's a good point, but hey, I love it.
Yeah. No, you're right. And he's owning it. He's owning it. There's been we've each done some bad ones.
I had to confess my sin. I buried that one deep. Like I truly think it was like, how they say like you hide your trauma and then like something will just like a flick of the wrist. Or like, oh man, like one little sign, a brush of the hair.
Right, you're watching in week one. You're watching in week one, and we see Daniel Jones throw an interception. All of a sudden, you just have a flashback to you being like, I think he's going to throw for 5,000 yards this year.
Yeah. Oh, that was my worst call of all time. No doubt about it.
Maybe. What I'm going to, maybe.
That's
Jared
up there at least. My at least for bad calls.
All right, let's talk 2023 wide receivers because speaking of bad calls, this was really the only bad call that you made as far as your bust last year. And it's funny when I hadn't seen either of you guys' picks. And so before I even saw them, I was like, I'm not sure who I think are going to be all these busts, but I sure as hell hope somebody picks Chris Olave because he was at the very top of my list. He really was. And the Wolf picked Chris Olave. Mo picked George Pickens, who I also think is an excellent pick. But Olave, for various reasons, I'm just convinced is going to be an absolute killer for anybody who picks him where he's going. Wolf, make your case, and also as an extension of you, my case.
Yeah, and just a cautionary tale, you kind of alluded to, but one of my worst calls last year was on this show. It was the only bad bust call. It was wide receiver, and I didn't skip that. Go ahead. You tried to let me off the hook, but again, I'm about confessing my sins here. And that one was just so bad. Looked okay for the first half of the year, and we talked about that in the first round show. But man, did he turn that thing on. But yeah, Chris Olave. So maybe this is what he needs to get over the hump is me calling him a bust because of my track record with that last year. I don't see it. Everybody seems to love him. And maybe it is. I totally get the argument. The Clint Kubiak, he's bringing the Shanahan-inspired offense to the Saints. They're going to use more motion, and they're going to get him in advantageous situations and the layup targets that the Shanahans are known for, adding those kind of easy target branches to the route tree. That could go a huge way if they do that. And we saw a little bit of that so far this preseason, 94% route rate and a 46% target share from Derek Carr so far. That's pretty impressive and pretty encouraging, which has me like a little shaky. But then I look at it and I think, okay, well, it's coming from Derek Carr. And Derek Carr has been just god-awful these last few seasons. And I just don't know. You also look at the fact that the motion has not been there. And maybe it's preseason. They don't want to give their hand away. But they've been bottom 3 in motion rate so far this preseason. They have not been really moving him around at all. And I just look at the guy, and historically, you're talking about a guy that has been top 12 in only 5 of 31 games across his NFL career so far. That's 16%. That's really not solid. 3 top 12 games last year. And maybe he's just not as talented as we all believe. The wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 22. You want to take him as a wide receiver 2 in round 4 or 5? Yeah, it'd be great there. But mid-round 2, early round 2, at times in best ball, no thank you. Yeah, of course, he had the 3rd most unrealized air yards, 72nd in target accuracy. That is like, yeah, he maybe is talented, but just getting hampered down. But again, same guy is still a quarterback in Derek Carr. So, yes, maybe the scheme changes will help him out. Maybe an expanded route tree and layup targets can balance out the floor a little bit. I just see a guy that I think everyone – I don't know. It is tricky because there's been glimpses that this guy is really damn talented, but also why is he not – usually the real true alphas, those true guys that are getting drafted where he goes, are able to elevate no matter who their quarterback is. And I just don't know that Chris Olave is one of those guys, and he still has the quarterback that's been the reason he sucked, apparently, according to everybody. So I don't know. I don't fully buy him at this price. I'd much rather go Drake London, Mike Evans. Nico Collins goes almost a round after in redraft him. Deebo Samuel goes after Chris Olave, which is absolutely asinine. Like, Deebo Samuel's a monster. I would go any of those guys 10 out of 10 times over Chris Olave. So needless to say, I don't have any of them this year.
Look, I'm a big believer in like the best receiver on a not great team. Mo, I remember, was in on Nico Collins early last year, basically using that exact same logic. I'm pretty sure it was Mo. And there's guys that I like in that situation this year. I just don't like him. I think the Saints are going to be absolutely terrible.
Yeah,
I really do. I'm fading every single person on the Saints. I don't care what's going on. As far as you saying, like the true alpha dog receivers, they should be able to elevate no matter who their quarterback is. Well, I mean, you remember when DeAndre Hopkins, who is amazing, his career was ruined by Brock Osweiler, right? There are exceptions to that statement, no matter how good you are. I just don't see it for Olave this year, especially where he's going so high.
I think it's a great point, too, bringing up the whole team. Like, if I had to make a bet today, who's the first coach to get fired this year? I think Dennis Allen is by far the top of that list. And I know that shouldn't necessarily impact the offense, but if it's just bad vibes, horrible game after game, the line looks so bad. So, again, maybe they have to get it out quicker to Olave, or maybe it's just another season of 100 checkdowns to Alvin Kamara. While Mo gives his take, I am going to try to look up. I had a stat saved that I forgot to put in this, and it's from Josh Norris, and it's related to the highest wide receiver finish inside like a bottom 10 offense is X. And it's not high. And maybe they were number, I know, Mo, you've always corrected me on this. They were like top 9 in points per game last year. So maybe they aren't as bad as we expect. But I don't know. I think this team's going to combust.
Their line, I think, is terrible also.
Yeah.
Anyway, enough of my Saints bashing. Mo, what do you think about George Pickens this year, and why do you think he's going to not live up to expectations, which I happen to agree with you on as well?
Well, let me comment on Chris Olave real quick. You might have seen me sitting there for the last 3 minutes with a shit-eating grin on my face.
I did. I was.
Yeah, after I've been drafting Chris Olave in round 2, my fair share. It's just like you said. Yeah, it was a top 9 offense last year. Like, no matter what everyone's like perception of the offense was, top 10 in points per game. I just can't wait for him to realize those air yards. And he's just not. I've just got faith that this guy is just the true alpha of this offense. He could be up there for the league leaders in targets this year, and with some targets that aren't just pure go routes. It was absolutely insane. I heard a stat. It was with Matt Harmon from Reception Perception. It was somewhere along the lines of 7%. 7% of Chris Olave's routes his rookie season were slants. That was the lowest rate he had ever charted in the history of Reception Perception. And they were just misusing this man beyond belief. And this is a narrative that has been kind of peddled throughout the offseason. And Pete Carmichael has been the offensive coordinator in New Orleans for some time now. And this is going to be the first time in over 2 decades that it's not a Sean Payton crony running the show in New Orleans. We're finally getting some fresh ideas. We're finally going to hopefully get a better route tree, better usage for Chris Olave. So I'm betting on the talent here and his ability to dominate the target share market and succeed based on talent and improved usage. But once again, you can't argue with the failures here and there or throughout the first 2 years of his career. And there is a very real chance that this offense implodes. So there's reasons to fade him. Like the Anthony Richardson take, I will not be fading him, but I understand why. But moving on to my pick, which is George Pickens. Speaking of an expanded route tree, people are expecting this out of George Pickens. This guy runs a route bush, man. This is no tree. This is a guy who runs nothing but go routes. It's just not. I don't know what people are thinking they're going to get out of George Pickens this year. So the biggest thing here is this is the most 40 IQ, no thought take of all time, but just fade the wide receiver one in an Arthur Smith offense. Since Arthur Smith has been an offensive coordinator or a head coach, it's 2 years as the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, 3 years as the head coach in Atlanta. The wide receiver one in terms of their fantasy finish in Arthur Smith offenses. Wide receiver 21, A.J. Brown. Wide receiver 12, A.J. Brown. Wide receiver 38, Russell Gage. Wide receiver 31, Drake London. Wide receiver 37, Drake London. So I think 2 of the 3 wide receivers on that list, which are A.J. Brown and not Russell Gage, A.J. Brown and Drake London, are immensely talented and far more talented than George Pickens. And I know some people are going to give me some pushback on Drake London just based on how he's produced, but I will stand here and tell you that Drake London is 100% a far more talented wide receiver, and he could not overcome the nonsense that Arthur Smith is doing out there. I mean, you hear this guy in the preseason discussions, just what he wants to do with this offense. He's talking about running the ball on 50% of his plays. He's saying things along the lines of, if we run 1,000 plays this season, I want 500 of them to be carries. It's just absolute nonsense what this guy wants to do with his offense, and people are still somehow okay taking Pickens as a fringe wide receiver too. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 27 in round 5 right now. It's just it's lunacy to me that people are buying in to a guy who is less talented than guys who have failed in Arthur Smith offenses before. And the people who are buying in, they're latching onto a 4-game sample. I learned my lesson last year, latching onto a small sample size last year with Cam Akers. And the 4-game sample without Deontay Johnson last year, it's promising. 28.6% target share, 3 yards per route run, and 16.6 fantasy points per game. So they're promising numbers, but this is a 4-game sample. And across a full season, I just don't see Pickens producing at these numbers. I don't think he's that kind of target earner. I don't think he's the type of guy who has a full route tree in him that's going to see all sorts of targets that aren't just these contested go route, jump ball type of targets. It's just, that's not what George Pickens' game is, and I don't think he's going to do that. And I don't even think Arthur Smith needs or wants him to do that, considering how many times they're going to run the ball. And then we haven't even gotten started on what the quarterback play is going to look like. I mean, I understand that it could be an upgrade from what we saw out of Kenny Pickett last year, but I mean, you watched that preseason game, Wolf. It was heinous out of both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. I mean, everyone just made fun of Russell Wilson relentlessly last year for how terrible he was. And yeah, Justin Fields, I mean, as much as we love him for fantasy because of the rushing stuff, I mean, this guy is not an NFL quarterback. And I'm an Ohio State fan, like sitting here and telling you this, like I should be as biased as they come when it comes to Justin Fields. And I'm telling you, this guy is not an NFL caliber quarterback when it comes to passing the ball. He legitimately looks like he's out there on a tape delay. It's just not someone that I want to be investing. Like, this is not an offense in general that I want to be investing in outside of the running backs. And it's just set up for this just to be a total disaster. If someone is going to overcome the Arthur Smith offense, it's someone like A.J. Brown. But he is just a completely different level of a receiver than George Pickens. They're not on the same level. A.J. Brown is an alien alpha wide receiver that George Pickens is not. I will not be taking any pieces of the passing attack in this offense this year. George Pickens is one of them. Give me Anthony Richardson in this range. I know you want to fade him, but give me Anthony Richardson over George Pickens. Give me Kyle Pitts over George Pickens. Oh. I would much rather have either of those players than George Pickens in the middle of round 5. And I can save my Kyle Pitts rant for another day, but it is so easy for me to pass on George Pickens this year.
I mean, I completely agree with you on your Pickens take. I mean, and Justin, I wrote a scathing article for RSJ. I don't write that many articles. I wrote an absolutely scathing Justin Fields article last year. I was after he had finally had one good game. We basically like, should you sell him? And I was like, yes. And I made a very compelling case. And then he had just a phenomenal game the next week, like just put up like 50 fantasy points. And I did eventually end up being right, but there was a week or two where I looked like an absolute moron for that. But yeah, you're right. He does not look like an NFL quarterback at all. The only reason I was gasping and stuff is you're throwing out some pretty terrible names around that you'd rather have than Pickens. And to me, it's kind of like, do you want to take a Chain or a Barkley at the end of the first round? And then you kind of dodged it. And we're like, neither. I don't want any of those guys.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I all of them have their reasons. I just think the Pickens is the biggest evil of the bunch.
That's fair. Yeah. Who's going to throw him the football? Right.
I agree too, by the way. I do want to bring up that 4-game sample. He was on pace in the games without Deontay Johnson, 140 targets, 72 catches, 1,517 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Would have been 246 points or the wide receiver 6 last year. But I also fully acknowledge that was a different offense, different QB, 139 yards on the preseason game where they started Russell Wilson and Justin Fields the entire game against third stringers and only put up 3 points. I'm with you. I don't want any piece of this. I've definitely changed my Pickens take. I do like the player a lot. I think he is more than you're giving him credit for as a talent. There's actually a stat. I saw Fantasy Points Data posted it. He was in like the top 7 in yards after catch when given opportunities. So I think there is more that Pickens can do, but I also don't think Arthur Smith is going to demand that of him, and I do not trust the quarterbacks to do it either. So I'm definitely with you. I'm fading this entire passing game, other than maybe taking like a last-round best ball stab at Fields himself, not for the passing upside, but for the rushing upside. Yeah, I think he's a good fade for sure, George Pickens.
All right, let's wrap things up with tight ends. This is where you're going to get the hottest take out of the Wolf. But, honestly, pretty hot take out of Mo as well. This is going to be interesting. Before we do that, let's talk 2023 and who they picked at tight end. This is the only one where Mo has a little bit of egg on his face. Wolf, you picked Kyle Pitts, who the aforementioned Kyle Pitts. Kind of don't even really think you deserve credit for this. I mean, this is just kind of like shooting ducks in a barrel. I mean, what is
he was going like? Top 6 in fantasy. I definitely deserve credit for this.
Right, but you and I both knew how stupid that was.
Yeah,
we were just like, that's moronic. This guy. I mean, how many years are we going to be like, this is the year for Kyle Pitts? Anyway, you got it right. I think it's, at least in my head, it was not a super gutsy pick because it seemed obvious. I seen that he just had like a tattoo on his forehead that said, "I'm going to be a bust." And he was again. Mo picked George Kittle. He wasn't really a bust.
No, he was just George Kittle doing George Kittle things. We had a good debate on that one, and I'll definitely take the W there. I said on victory lap when we got back to this show the next year, and just want to take that quick little jaunt around real quick. That was terrible. I will say truth. I actually could get down with Kyle Pitts this year.
Stop it.
I know. I was tempted to do him as the bust again just for like old time's sake, but I kind of buy the
where's he going right
now? Offense.
Where's he going right now?
5th, 6th round.
If he doesn't
Where?
do it,
Fifth
it's
or
going
sixth
like
round.
late six.
There's no way I'm taking that guy in the 5th or 6th round. No
And
way.
for the record, I don't either, just because I go George Kittle instead. I'd rather have George Kittle. It's easy for me. So I don't really have much Kyle Pitts, but I wouldn't be shocked if like this is the year he does actually break out. He's got everything in his path. If he doesn't do it this year, then the dream is definitely over.
So
but
you'd rather take George Kittle, who is good, over Kyle Pitts, who is bad, and at the same that's right. So
not
do you
both.
remember after Josh Gordon came back from weed suspension, and every year for like 5 years we were like, oh yeah, this is it.
He's coming back, baby.
Yeah, every time we would get so excited, he'd play like 2 games and then he'd get suspended or whatever.
Yeah.
How long are we going to do this for Kyle Pitts? Anyway, he's not even one of you guys' picks this year.
Yeah.
I'm just
At
all
least 1 more year we're going to do it.
okay. I'm just all lathered up about it now. All right. 2024 picks. The Wolf. Talk about coming off the top rope. Both of you guys. The Wolf is picking Sam Laporta. Everybody's darling at tight end. He finished 1 last year, right?
Yes, he did.
And Mo with TJ Hawkinson. That's a kind of hot take too. What's going on? Defend yourself.
Yeah, so I will just say right from the jump, not to even make us a hedge, like I have Laporte as my tight end 2, just behind Travis Kelce in a tier together. I believe in his fantasy upside. I think he's going to have a great year. Would not surprise me at all if he goes back-to-back as the tight end 1. This is just like Mo's argument for Pat Mahomes last year being a bust, where I do not see why Sam Laporta is going 20-plus picks above the tight end 3 right now.
Crazy.
The tight end 4 right now going pick 50 in Mark Andrews. I think that gap is way too wide. So while I love Sam Laporta as a player, I just do not see. Last year, 11.5 fantasy points per game, very solid. Mark Andrews, 11.3. Literally a 0.2 difference in points per game, but a difference of 23 total picks. And where you take Laporta, you're now passing up on some of those receivers we talked about that we love. Deebo Samuel, Nico Collins, Drake London. Maybe you want to take that early stab at Josh Allen and get the most elite of elite quarterbacks. You want to take a onesie in that spot? Make it the quarterback who's been the number 1 player in fantasy in historically a top 10 all-time performance in 4 straight years. Like, that is wild. Why not go for that instead of a tight end who might be 0.5 points better than a guy that's going 30 picks later? Again, love Laporte. I think he's a phenomenal player. Could he take a step forward? Rookie's the hardest position to translate is tight end, and he did that as a rookie. Like, that is very impressive. But then I also look at his situation. Amon-Ra St. Brown, always going to be the target vacuum there. J-Mo Williams apparently having a phenomenal camp, whether you buy it or not. Looks like he is taking another step. If you don't believe in him, well, Jahmyr Gibbs is here playing in the slot and taking another step as a pass catcher, a guy they want to use like Christian McCaffrey, according to the latest reports. So all of that to say is like, yeah, Laporte is in a great offense, going to have some huge games, but it's just not a path, a runway to really – I can't see him getting significantly better than last year. Now, if he gives you what he gave you last year, great, but why would I take that over Trey McBride, who's going – 27 picks later.
I'd way rather have Trey McBride.
Yeah, honestly, maybe straight up. But, like, okay, I'd probably have Laporta above him. But Trey McBride at pick 50, who actually as a starter had 11.7 points per game, which was more than Sam Laporta. That's really the argument here. It's not that I don't like Laporta. It's that I think that is a brutal pick to make because there's so many good players. Again, receivers, if you want to go Achane there. Devon Achane, the guy that thinks going to break fantasy. He goes after Sam Laporta. Go running backs, receivers, get your elite quarterback onesie, and then look at your tight ends in round 5 and pick a McBride, pick an Andrews, hell, pick a Kincaid, the number 1 potential option for Josh Allen. Right? Kittle's going at pick 61. All those guys are right around Laporta. And so, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but just what you're gaining for the amount you have to pay is significantly not worth it. I do not see Laporta paying off that price with the opportunity cost that's gonna force you to take on. Whereas the round 5 guys that you're passing up on, we just talked about George Pickens. Those are the guys that are going in round 5. Okay, easy fade, easy to get a tight end in that range. Not so easy to fade the guys that Laporta's going around.
So just to be clear, when I said I'd way rather have McBride, I was talking about for the price.
Yes. Okay.
I do probably like Laporta slightly more than McBride, but not a ton more. I love McBride. And I mean, you're talking about a difference of like several rounds. I would certainly much rather have someone like him than Laporta. It's funny. People get really good. They come in as the one, like we saw with Mahomes and everything else. People get really weird about it. All of a sudden, their value just gets blown up to a point where it just doesn't even make any sense anymore. So, yeah, I guess he'd be a pass for me at that cost as well.
What is interesting, Chris, and I know you do auction drafts too. Laporta in auctions is going for like 17, 16. Like, I'll take him there because then McBride's going like 14, 13. But that just kind of illustrates the point. Like in a snake draft, a second rounder, a late second rounder, early third rounder, that should be like a $35, $40 player.
Absolutely.
But he's going 17, 18. So like you just like look at the two different formats and it kind of helps illustrate like this gap makes no sense right now in snake draft price. Take him in an auction at 17, sure, all day. Sure. But that's where he should be priced, not as a $35 player, and he's not being priced that way, appropriately so.
I'm a buyer in an auction at 17 or even 20, but for the numbers you're talking about, we're in total lockstep on that. Mo, TJ Hawkinson.
I gotta pile onto this Sam Laporta real quick. I would have made the case for Laporta if Wolf didn't.
Okay.
It's almost as if people just automatically assume that the last year's tight end one is now worth like a second round pick or like a pick at the 2-3 turn. We have to understand that this is not the kind of performance out of Sam Laporta that we were getting out of like the Kelce's and the Andrews. And I know Kelce at his peak was a first round pick and he was averaging like 20 points a game. But last year, Laporta 14.1 points per game. And in the years that Andrews and Kelce were the non-nuclear Kelce years, they were performing at like 17 points per game. It was a significant step up. And even in those years, like their following year ADP was in the same spot or even later, like late round 2 or early round 3. So it's basically just like people are saying, oh, yep, this guy tight end 1, we're going to plop him right at the end of round 2, even though he was not performing even anywhere near the levels. And I think you kind of hit on it pretty well, but I think this guy's ceiling is pretty capped in terms of just because Amon-Ra St. Brown is the clear number 1 in this offense. He's the target hog. We expect some growth and some emergence out of some secondary pass catchers. And just you didn't really harp on it. 10 touchdowns last season, just exceeded touchdown expectations by a pretty wide margin. So this guy is going to disappoint. Like maybe he still finishes as the tight end 1, but a late second round pick, give me a break. It's a joke, but people just aren't thinking this through.
Excellent point. I agree.
Yeah. Moving on to my guy here, it is TJ Hawkinson. And this one is pretty cut and dry for me. It's really, really straightforward. TJ Hawkinson is coming off a multi-ligament ACL tear, or multi-ligament knee tear, rather. He tore his ACL and MCL on Christmas Eve last year. And that is it's just such a different injury from a traditional ACL tear, a clean ACL tear, as you'll often hear it. It prolongs the recovery period, and it makes players look significantly worse when they hit the field once again. You think back to Javonte Williams last year, just like how much of a shell of his former self he looked like last year when he came back from that multi-ligament tear. And I know running back's a little bit different, or significantly different rather than it is for tight ends, but just to kind of give you an idea of what a multi-ligament tear can do to a player. But just in terms of the recovery line, just performance aside, just in terms of the recovery timeline, TJ Hawkinson may have had this injury on Christmas Eve, but he didn't have his surgery until the end of January 29th to be exact. And these typical multi-ligament tears, it usually takes 10 months for a guy to return. The 10-month mark puts him at week 12 of this season. That is pushing the fantasy playoffs. And I know that there's been some reports that he's a little bit ahead of schedule, but I think a conservative, a liberal expectation would be somewhere around week 10. And even then, that's well over half of the fantasy season. So if you're drafting this guy as a fringe starter, he's off the board as the tight end 13. So if you're drafting him as the tight end 13, you're hoping that this guy has a moderately large impact on your lineup, but who knows what it's going to be if he's not even on the field until week 12. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, you're hoping that you're going to get him for your playoff push. But if you're spending a 10th round pick on TJ Hawkinson and he's not hitting your lineup until week 12 or week 13, like, you might be out of the playoff contention by that point. It might not even matter whatsoever. And that doesn't even consider the fact that this offense, it might take a step back with Sam Darnold under center.
We don't know what kind of it definitely will.
Yeah. We don't know what kind of player he's going to look like when he returns, like, just in terms of his own performance as an individual. So this is all just setting up to be just a guy that you stash on your IR slot, and he might not even matter for your fantasy lineup the entire season because he's not back until week 10, 11, 12. So just easy fade for me as a fringe starter in these leagues. Like, I don't know what you're doing drafting TJ Hawkinson unless, like, I don't know. I can't really think of a scenario where I would be interested. Like, maybe if I've locked down like a mid-tier tight end one, like a Bowers or a Ferguson, perhaps. Like, and then if he slides maybe a bunch, but there's going to be that one guy in your league who's like, oh my God, TJ Hawkinson's here in round 10. Like, how has he not been drafted yet? And not understanding that it's very realistic that this guy is not available until week 12.
It's all. I mean, you could also see some guy in your auction draft being like TJ Hawkinson for $10. Like, I'm in. Right. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen just because of the name. Your argument is compelling. Also, I think we should possibly make shirts or bumper stickers or something that say, it's possible the offense could struggle under Sam Darnold.
Yeah,
very possible.
There's a chance. There's a puncher's chance.
A small chance. You do look at it, and you also see, though, that the Vikings, even with Kirk Cousins out for well over half the year, 9 games of Jaron Hall, Nick Mullins, whoever else, Josh Dobbs, for as long as he played, they still led the league in passing yards, which is crazy. I am a big believer in Kevin O'Connell, but I'm fully with you, Mo, in terms of like this injury timeline. It seems like 10 weeks is like a best case. And then is he really himself? How long is he getting his legs under him for that period? And then there also is the risk of, like, if they are knocked out, if this team does completely implode under Darnold and they don't have any playoff contention, there's a chance that Hawkinson is just not even, you don't see him all year. Like, why you put him out here, risk it, let's let him get, fully get healthy. Maybe they give him a couple tryout games to get contact and test the knee, but not really actually play him type of situation. That's certainly in the range of outcomes. It's a little different in redraft where there are like IR spots and, you can stash him without hurting your bench. But if he's eating up bench space, and even then, like, an IR spot's valuable. If somebody gets hurt in week 1, week 2, to be able to stash them and not have to drop somebody or burn a roster spot, it's a lot easier to stomach a draft injured guy in your IR spot if you know they're going to be back like week 5, 6. But yeah, week 10's the optimistic outlook. It's a tough sell in round 10 where there's still really interesting players. Jaden Daniels, one of our favorite quarterbacks, often goes around 9, 10. Like, why bother with TJ Hawkinson? I'm with you there.
Great arguments today, guys. And I think this is actually going to be a really good podcast. We do have a little over 200 people watching right now. So if you could give us a like or a subscribe or whatever currency your social media, viewing experience is giving you, give it to us. We'd really love it. It helps us get out to more and more people. It's awesome to see so many people here. Wolf, before we hit the mailbag, we do have a few questions. But before we hit the mailbag, I just want to tell you, I made a Brock Osweiler reference. I was referring to quarterbacks that could destroy even the best receivers. And we would agree DeAndre Hopkins back then is about as good as it got, right? I mean, he was incredible. There is an article in the archives of the Roto Street Journal from November 2016, where it kind of a lazy article. I'm the one who wrote it, but it's kind of a lazy article, but it's pretty funny also. And it's just entitled 20 Things Better Than Brock Osweiler. And it's just a list of 20 things better than Brock Osweiler. And I'll just read you like 1 or 2 of the examples. Let's see. Swine flu, I said, was better than Brock Osweiler. When you have to throw up and have diarrhea at the same time and you have to choose which one goes in the toilet and which one goes in the floor, I said that one was better than Brock Osweiler. So anyway, we've been talking about this guy for a solid 8 years. And there's 18 more things on the list. Yeah. Roto Street Journal, been doing it for a long time.
Go check out the archives for a hidden legend article right there. What's better than Brock Osweiler? We definitely have some weird articles like where we were kind of like spreading our wings and not fully serious about everything. I have one about like Mel Kiper on draft day. Like, what happens after draft day? He's like addicted to Tinder and like evaluating like his There's some weird stuff in the archives of Roto Street Journal. There's no doubt about it. There's some seedy underbelly to
we were working things out. We were working things out. There's some good stuff too, but that was pretty damn funny.
Yeah.
Let's hit the mailbag real quick. We just got a few things, so let's go. Charlie, he survived the first stream. Let's go.
Good to see a survivor out there still with us, Charlie. Love to see it.
Charlie also
we've got some good comments in our Road Truth where you've like, who was your worst pick of last year? A lot of people kind of confessing their sins, getting the baggage off there. Allen Robinson's still there. Sky Moore, that's a great one.
That's a good one.
Horrible last year. I think Mo, you were a little Sky Moore guy last year, weren't you?
It was an unfortunate scenario for me with the Chiefs wide receivers. I had a hard fade on Kadarius Toney, and as a result, landed on Sky Moore for the most part. Little to no acknowledgement to Rashee Rice. So it was a win-lose net neutral there for me.
I love that phrasing. I love that. It was an unfortunate scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing, just going back to Allen Robinson for a second, that one bothers me so much because I was on it a lot of times you're on early and then I hear what you say and I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was on it, like we were both on it. When the move happened, we both texted each other and we were just like, Allen Robinson to the Rams, like forget it.
Sean McVay. Like,
right, here we go. Like this, it's all over. And I was so confident. And then I was so wrong.
Yeah. I remember too, like why I remember him so much too was because it was Thursday Night Football, Chiefs versus Rams. Like we were like, our Allen Robinson, we both had him in all our leagues, and we're like, we get to go watch Allen Robinson dominate. And he had like one catch for 12 yards. We're like,
for like 10, 12 yards.
And we were so excited. Too. Like he wasn't even getting looked at. He wasn't getting any separation. It was one of those busts. Like as soon as you watch the game, you're like, he's going to be horrible all year. The whole pregame, like Allen Robinson, baby, let's go.
We were so excited, and then I think in week 2 he also had a ho hum game, but he caught like a 2-yard touchdown maybe, and we were both like, okay, like here we go, and it was like
such false hope. But we never really like it was so bad both weeks that it's like a little sign was like you take anything he give you, but man, like we knew it right from week 1. It was like And I remember like tweeting out, like, I'm going to put him in the flex to make him think about what he's done. And like, I wish I hadn't because he had like 0.3 points the next week. It's, that was one of the worst. Daniel Jones was really bad last year. Allen Robinson's up there.
I think Allen Robinson made me feel worse though.
Yeah, because he was just like, Daniel Jones was at least like a 10th rounder. So it's like, all right, he busted. Oh, well. Allen Robinson was like a good, like 2nd, 3rd rounder, like upbidding people in auctions to make sure you got him type of guy.
Oh, yeah. I was throwing money at him.
Yeah. Throwing money at it. Oh, God.
I was making it rain.
Oh, we got to move off of him. Damian Pierce was so frustrating last year. So good as a rookie and so bad in this scheme. Like, that's a great one. I know, Mo, you probably have some thoughts on the Bengals. Will Hayes corrected himself right after, but the Bengals need to sign Chase immediately. Yeah. Like, do you think there's any even Schefter got in on the tweet today that, like, he might not play until he gets a contract? Are you buying this?
Schefter's been dogging this situation since it's like developed a month ago. Schefter has lost some credibility in my eyes after this whole. He's trying to drum up some narrative that's not there. I do think the Bengals are a mildly incompetent franchise in terms of how they handle their contracts, especially the big ones.
Mild is a nice one there.
I gotta give them the benefit of the doubt as they are my team. I can't be fully woke to the reality of the situation, but yeah, they historically they pay their guys, like whether you like it or not. They do pay their guys. They gave Carson Palmer the bag. They gave Dalton the bag. They gave AJ Green the bag. They gave Burrow his money. They pay their big guys. For the most part, it's a pretty inept front office, but they'll get the deal done. I don't think this is going to be a long-term situation, but would like Will points out, would like to have it done sooner rather than later.
This would not be a fantasy fullback dive episode if Mo didn't come in and just rapid defense of Jamar Chase.
That'll be the running episode of the summer for sure.
This is like the drinking game. Anyway, Bulldog, what's up, guys? I made it. What's up, Bulldog?
Good to see you, Bulldog. We already showed Sam praising your take over there, Mo. And anybody else out there, too, get those questions on in, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're at. And, of course, again, those thumbs ups really help us. Great to see you, Murray. This is always that time of the year. I know, Murray, but it's like the phone starts to buzz a little bit more. And people you haven't talked to in about 9 months. I always loved football season because I love chatting ball with Murray. And some people just start to come out of the weeds again. And we were talking about the Falcons. It looks like he has a comment on that, too. But great to see you, Murray.
You guys know way more about this stuff than me, but even me, people kind of come out of the woodwork that haven't talked to me in like 9-10 months asking me questions and stuff. You know, it's just, it happens around this time. The air gets a little cooler and crisper and my phone starts buzzing just a little bit more.
I feel cool again.
Right. It's true. Guys that like had no use for me.
Care about me.
They got a lot of questions for me now. Omar, my running back bust this year is Gibbs, already injured, too expensive sharing with Monty. Plus, when they get ahead, they lean on Monty to ice games. When we did our top 12 podcast, I told you how much I liked Gibbs, and almost like immediately, I still like him, but almost immediately, I was like, I was too high on the guy.
Yeah,
I kind of agree with Omar.
I know. The Hammy came in not long after that podcast. It's tricky, and this is a second Hammy thing of the offseason, and Hammy's just like always lingers. So I've bumped him down to 16 overall on my big board. Right. And I don't typically get him now because people still will be willing to take a stab. And it could pan out. I mean, again, they talked about using him as Christian McCaffrey style. And he is such a good receiver. And we saw how explosive he was in the second half last year. Obviously in games without Monty, but even with Monty in there, he was top two in terms of top 5 games on the year. The guy is so damn good and so fun to watch. But yeah, this could linger. This could be bad. Mo, are you out on Gibbs now? Like, I guess we haven't really. We almost drafted him in the other draft, and we never got to kind of like circle back on that on Monday. It seems like you're still down to take some Gibbs.
Yeah. Massive pass catcher, just a dynamic talent all around. It's just these sorts of guys you don't just ignore. I understand, like. I think he's got to just be a staple of the 1-2 turn, regardless of the hamstring. It's just it's concerning that it's a flare up, perhaps, of the one from earlier this offseason. But you check out some of the stuff on these hamstring injuries. It's typically 1 to 2 weeks before, and then these guys are good to go. Campbell came out and said it was either today or yesterday that he could be back at practice as soon as Sunday. So they're taking it slow with him, obviously. But 100% for the season, almost guaranteed, and just an offense all around that you wanted pieces of. And he is the second most. You could argue that he's a more dynamic kind of guy than Amon-Ra St. Brown, but good guy. What's not to love about this talent? And I think he will continue to chip away at that David Montgomery workload.
I think they play. I saw this today. It's like maybe only 3 games outside all year. Possibly 4.
It is. Yeah. It's 3. It's all indoor.
It's all indoors, which is beautiful. You love to see it. I know in the Vegas implied totals, like they're the highest scoring or second highest scoring team, and they are in, I think, 10 to 12 games projected for over like 48 points already. So it's just one of those like, let's go. Defense sucks. Offense is great. Yep. Shootouts, baby. Indoor dome. Gibbs could be a huge part of that if he is healthy. So I'm not fully fading him by any means, but it's just tough to get him when I have him at 16 right now. Maybe I have to bump him back up. I don't know. I get off of him and then I get back in. Like, he is so damn exciting to have.
Just when you thought you were out, you get pulled back in.
And I think that's one answer to what Bulldog is answering. So I know you have the question here, Truth, but like Gibbs is one of those guys that certainly could be there for you at the end of second round.
Who are some of the guys you're all drawn to in the second round? If you're starting from picks 10 to 12 in a 12-teamer, Mo was just referencing that staple of the first, second round turn. I honestly don't like most of them. I don't want to reach too much either.
Yeah, I hate the 12 pick this year. I mean, it's kind of these guys that we're talking about, Gibbs, Puka, these injuries that like guys that probably would have been going 9-10. Okay, I'll take Gibbs and Puka. And, hope that they're fully healthy. And I hope I'm getting the guys that were going at 8-9 for a while in best ball. Those are a couple guys I like. I do love starting Jonathan Taylor if he's there. Jonathan Taylor, even Jonathan Taylor Saquon. I know he's one of Mo's busts, but after doing the Roto Street draft and having the 12 pick, I really wish I had gone running back. And I wouldn't say that for every draft slot. But I think that's it's such a gross situation where like the receivers after Garrett Wilson have dropped off. So I don't want to force one of those guys in. Nico Collins will fall to round 3 sometimes. Cooper Kupp's there at the end of round 3 a lot. There's just a lot of depth at wide receiver and redraft. So I kind of like just going cow, getting 2 running backs and Taylor, Barkley, even though I'm with you, Mo, I don't love Barkley this year, but like how he could outscore whatever, like Rashad White's the next running back I'm looking at in round 3. And like, no, thank you. I don't want any of those running backs. Like I'd rather just get 2 guys and then load up on the wide receiver depth and redraft this year when I'm drafting the bottom there. So I'm typically looking at 2 running backs there, Bulldog, some combination of Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Gibbs. If I get 2 of those guys, I feel really damn good about my start.
I can't disagree with that. Other than Barkley, I think grabbing 1 running back there is a good call. My preference would be running back, wide receiver with some combination of AJ Brown and Garrett Wilson, ideally.
Yeah, but they're gone by 12.
AJ Brown's not going to be there at 12.
I would agree. I'm with you there. If AJ Brown or Garrett Wilson are there, Mo, yes.
Yeah,
me too.
He said 10 to 12. Consensus ADP has AJ Brown at 10.
Yeah. Okay. So 10.
If AJ Brown is there at 12, we all are in complete lockstep. We'd rather have him than anybody else.
100%. Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll expand the bounds of my response.
That's too easy.
I'll expand the bounds of my response. A combination of a running back and a receiver, one of AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, or Puka, and then one of JT or Kyron.
Okay.
I think that's
Kyron. Kyron's a great one to toss in there. I should have had in there too. Like for my running back, the 3 guys I said, I actually have Kyron above Gibbs. So okay. So Puka and one of those 3 backs. I like that start. I just like it depends on what's happening with Kupp's ADP. I know he's starting to creep up in best ball. He's still hovering towards the end of round 3 in redraft. So if I could get like 2 again bell cows and then Kupp, who might actually be better than Puka this year, I don't know if that's going to happen. He's probably going to keep creeping up, but that's part of the reason I like getting the bell cows stable. But Puka's a good one. Is there any other receiver you'd even consider there? Because that's where I really struggle. Is it Nico? Is it Debo? Probably none in redraft. I don't know.
No, probably not, to be honest. I guess I could see the argument for Marv. In redraft, the Nico pick there is just an egregious reach. It's a round and a half. I was thinking about this, Truth, guess who is like a staple of the 1-2 turn in these best ball drafts? Like the 2 wide receivers that you see go 12-13 like all the time.
Is Nico one of them?
It's Marvin Harrison and Drake London are a staple of the 1-2 turn.
On the 1-2 turn?
I am not kidding at all. A staple.
I know I'm not any sort of best ball expert, but I'm just floored by the fact that
I thought you would be.
We were saying, Truth, we got to do one stream where you come and do a best ball draft with us and just like watch your reactions to some of this ADP. It is crazy in the best ball streets.
Yeah, it'd be like if I was like a guy from like I'm like Captain America or something, like cryogenically frozen and then coming out and like seeing the for the first time. I'll just be like, you got to pick like YA Tittle here. And I'll just be like, no, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Oh man.
Okay.
Going there. Matthew Murray saying, "Don't sleep on Kirk Cousins' effect. He's ex machina," which I love. He really is. Like it's just a huge pie. When Kirk arrives, huge pie, huge aerial pie, feeding mouths, feeding families. I'm a big fan of Kirk Cousins, Zach Robinson duo. But that's why I love Drake London in redraft goes like the end of round 2. Phenomenal pick.
Yeah. Kyle
Pitts though, you'll never get sold on.
No.
Never again. You're probably going to be right too.
Not until
I'm more on the I would do it again.
Okay, but like at some point, the guy may have like a serviceable year, and because he's been overtly terrible, like every year he's been in the league at least. But at some point, let's say he has like an okay year, and then everyone's going to be like, see? And it's like, okay, we've been sitting on him for like 6 seasons. Like, I'm not going to throw a parade for you. Like, I just don't see it happening. No, I'm out.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Can we have unrelated conversation before we talk about Derrick Henry here? Did you all see the report on this beat reporter projecting that the split in Atlanta is going to be 16 carries a game for Bijan and 14 carries a game for Tyler Algier, like a near 50-50 split? What do you think about that?
I think that's insane. Like, is this a reputable source?
It's like a Sports Illustrated beat reporter for the Falcons.
Yeah. Terrible. I mean, so one thing that immediately jumped out to me, I think Rich Rebar commented it on Barrett, who posted it, was that would equate like 500 and something carries for the Falcons, and they had like 400 under Arthur Smith last year. Like, they're gonna have 100 more carries in a pass, like a 3 wide receiver base. There's no way. There's just not going to be that much volume.
I immediately questioned.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I immediately questioned the validity of anyone projecting them for 30 carries a game.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this: if they're carrying it 30 times a game, I don't think that particularly helps Kyle Pitts or Drake London's stock.
No, it wouldn't. And they're not going to do that. You don't get Kirk Cousins to hand the rock 30 times a game. There's no way. I think the point the guy might have been trying to make without like actually thinking about the raw numbers he was putting out there is it might be a closer split than people are thinking. And I could buy that. That's why we had, when we talked about Breece Hall versus Bijan Robinson, like for me, it is Breece Hall. It's not.
Yeah, I agreed with you on that.
And I'm not like using this report to like further that distance. Like I think it's a dumb report, but I do think like Algier, like maybe 15 carries for Bijan a week and 7 to 8 for Algier. That makes sense. And I could definitely see something like that. And I think Algier is a forgotten man and one of the best handcuff with benefits. I think it's like certainly one of the best pure handcuffs. But then if he is getting 7 to 8 carries, what if he does? He's a big body that can pound it in. Like Algier is one of my favorite late round running back picks. When we do our sleeper show, like sneak peek, Algier will definitely be one of my guys. I'm a huge fan of taking him late. So I don't buy that report at all, but I also do see Algier being a little bigger thorn than people realize, but Bijan's still getting his. Like, he's still my clear running back 3.
All right, let's talk about Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
I know this isn't the topic. Can we get some thoughts on King Derrick with Baltimore?
Looks like Murray's taking out the lotion and needs to hear some nice things about Derrick Henry right now.
He is.
He's talk to me about Derrick
himself Henry right now, getting loose. I love it. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, you wrote about him, Mo. Why don't you take it first, and I'll give my thoughts.
Yeah, it's like the for Hawkinson. I feel like it's pretty cut and dry here. The concerns are obvious. He's approaching age 30 or is 30 now. The history of running backs changing teams has also historically not been good for their fantasy production. So there's a couple of things working against him, but I'm willing to look past it. I mean, this guy is a monster. He's the king for a reason, and I'm willing to look past it. It's also just the game split or the when trailing and when leading, the splits for Henry have been ridiculous in Tennessee. Like when they're leading, he's just been a clear cut top 10 RB, top 5 even, and when they're behind, he's just like he's just a guy. Like he's a meaningful fantasy asset, but not by any means a difference maker. And then just the red zone opportunities that this offense will be able to provide. Like a 20 touchdown season is very much, I don't want to say it's like real, or it's realistic. It's not probable, but it's in the range of outcomes for Henry. I mean, we just saw them gift wrap, 13 or 14 touchdowns to Gus Edwards last year. So you can paint the picture here. It's been one of the most potent and successful rushing attacks in the last 5 years, especially with Lamar Jackson. And I hadn't even mentioned that, Lamar Jackson's presence in the backfield will likely allow Henry to see some lanes and see some boxes that he hadn't seen. Like, you can't just devote all your attention to Derrick Henry. You could see some a spike in his efficiency. So it's all looking up and up. Like, there's some reason to be concerned, but I'm willing to look past it. And I think he is one of those final guys who you can really justify taking in the second round or early third round.
Yeah, I mean, the only things to add there, the line, the worst line in football last year by run blocking in PFF for the Titans, now going to the Ravens, who have been, always top 10, and I think they're top 5 in the preseason Pro Football Focus. It's just one of those things like, could it be more perfect that, that no team runs the ball more than the Ravens for the last decade, and you get the ultimate workhorse that's ever existed, an absolute tank, the tractor Cito, Derrick Henry. Like it's just a match made in fantasy heaven. And it like, I don't end up getting him. I don't mean to be the buzzkill for it all. And then I guess the intangible there too is like your fantasy locker room where you have Derrick Henry and Ravens black and purple, like coming off the bus. I was like, that is the ultimate, just like, who am I facing this week? Oh my God, Derrick Henry. He's going to have 150 and 2 touchdowns. Like, he is the ultimate enforcer for your squad. Like, those are the intangibles that your team needs. And I fully understand that. And the more I talk about him, when I wrote about him in the guide as like a guy I'm like kind of getting, kind of not, I was like, damn, I'm writing about him and all I want to do is draft more Derrick Henry. It's like Henry versus Pacheco, where I know Pacheco's not even close to as sexy on paper, but like Chiefs offense and pass catching. And that's where Henry, he's not going to catch the ball. But man, like, you looked at all the stats last year in terms of like 20+ mile per hour runs was like top 3 of the league last year. Just because he's entering 30, I'm not going to. He's an outlier. We already know he's an outlier.
He's not.
I'm not holding that against him. The guy still has the juice. It could be you said 20 touchdowns, very, very possible. And if he does that and I don't have him, I'm going to hate my life. So yeah, I think I'm going to be bumped.
You will.
Before I think about him.
All right, we got just a couple more left. I'm nothing I could say would be anything but repeating what these guys say. I'll just say, like, the idea of having Derrick Henry really excites me.
In black and purple, like
black and
you've
purple.
seen the pictures. It's so perfect. It's supposed to happen. Like,
right.
fate. It was
Derrick Henry comes up, you see him, and like he has his game, and then he's like comes up to you after the game and's like, "Yeah, I'd like to take your wife out with me after the game." You'd be like, "Yo, you got it." Absolutely. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
We'll be here next week too. All right, Matt Murray, weather drops a bit, cool air fills the lungs, phone buzzes, nuts tingle. Yes. This time of year.
That's about right. That's that September vibe. The phone buzzing, the nuts tingling, and then the November, December rise is the nuts just getting kicked square with a steel tip boot, because we know how fantasy goes every year.
From Joey Sly.
While they're like Joey Sly, exactly. Enjoy the tingle while it lasts, I guess, is the lesson, because this is the time of the year where it's all hope. It's all optimism. The nuts are so tingly right now over fantasy football, and they're just going to get completely stomped on soon enough. So ride that tingle out, Murray, because it's not going to last too much.
The tingle can turn into a nut kick real fast.
Fast.
It's subtle, but it happens. All right, last question: which pick in Dynasty, Javon Baker, Luke McCaffrey, or Esteem?
Yeah, and Christopher saying LMC. So I mean, Christian McCaffrey would certainly be the number 1 pick there.
Yeah, I would take CMC there.
His younger brother, LMC. I actually, of these 3, I like Estime. I'm a really big fan of this bulldozer. 240 pounds, but can move. Whatever his 40 time says, I don't buy. The guy's play speed is much faster than his time speed. And Sean Payton single-handedly picked him, and we know Sean Payton has valuable backfields, and Javante's, I think this is the last year of his deal. So ultimately, like, there's a world where Estime is the starting big back for Sean Payton in a year or two. I'm a big fan of Estime, the player. McCaffrey, of course, you have the McCaffrey bloodline. Like, that's something nice to be attached to. To me, I guess it's just definitely not Baker at this point, like kind of falling behind in an ugly receiver rotation. And maybe all these guys are intriguing enough in their own right. To me, it's definitely Estime, though. What about you guys?
I have no opinion. I don't know about him well enough to really say, but I will say, as far as bloodline goes and stuff like that, I don't see Bronny James being that great in the NBA, so I'm not willing. I'm not putting too much stock in that.
I was going to say talking bloodlines in fantasy football is funny to me, but I think the answer here is just not Javon Baker. That I don't have a definitive answer either way. I was hopeful that Luke McCaffrey was going to win that slot job. It seems like they're just going to give it to Jahan Dotson. And I said this in reference to the Chiefs last episode, but it seems like they're just kind of flinging shit at the wall with Jahan Dotson and seeing what works. And if it works, it works. If not, maybe they move on to McCaffrey. But I'll say Estime. But I don't think you can go wrong as long as it's just not Javon Baker.
Fair enough.
There we go.
Good
Awesome.
guys.
Great show. Good BUSTS article. If you want 25 plus more BUSTS, go check out. I waved the entire episode, guys. I don't love to spam you here. But if you like this type of talk, I got 25 more BUSTS for you and so much more in the draft guide, rotostreetjournal.com/draft guide, round by round, picks, target, strategy, best ball versus redraft, only $10. If you want to support your guy, it's really the only thing we charge for all season. So it's just a great way to support us, help the light stay on over here at Roto Street Journal. Again, rotostreetjournal.com/draft guide. This is kind of a sneak peek of some of the BUSTS from there, but we got so many more for them in there as well, and so much strategy. So definitely check that out. Getting little sneak peeks on the website too, rotostreetjournal.com, of the draft guide, so you can see little bits and pieces and see if you want to commit to, again, less than the cost of a sandwich for the draft guide that's going to push you over the edge. But that's my plea for that. Any other content, Mo, you want to push? I know you got the trade value chart still in the works, right?
Yeah, that's coming out. Check me out on the Roto Street Journal Instagram. That's my domain these days.
Yeah.
So you can see the mediocre graphics that I'm putting together. A step above mediocre.
They're pretty good.
Dude, we're approaching 3K on Instagram right now. You're definitely getting the followers coming in.
So drop a follow. That's where I've been doing a lot of work these days. So, but yeah, excited for the regular season to start. My regular season staple is as of last year is the trade value chart. So that'll be fun once NFL gets going. I'm excited for this last couple week push, man. We're so close. Yeah. We are so close to real life football. I can only analyze preseason usage for so much longer.
Real quick, just I know we're on the way out. I did just want to ask both of you one question before we head out. Did you see the price tag for direct ticket?
No, yeah, wild.
Wild.
I've never bought Sunday ticket, and I will sure as hell not be forking over, what was it, $640
or more.
Yeah, $750, right? It's something like that.
If you bundle it with Red Zone, it's like $749 or something.
Oh.
I also, Mo, I had it with DirecTV. I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago, maybe. I haven't had it since then. But the price tag, I could not believe it when I saw it. Yeah.
That is atrocious. Why would you want anything other than Scott Hansen on your TV? The pure electric factory.
Yeah, that's all I'm watching.
There's nothing better. Talk about nut tingle. My God. Like, just thinking of Scott Hansen, that first like quad box popping up. Oh my goodness. I cannot wait.
The best Sunday of the year.
The best Sunday of the year. So close. So far, but so close. I cannot wait. Well, rotostreetjournal.com, guys. Again, check out all our content. I'll be live tomorrow morning, actually, with Walter Picks, doing we do an annual bold prediction show. So 9:30 a.m. too. If you haven't, if you're awake, want some coffee on your Thursday morning, bold predictions coming at you 9:30 a.m. Me and Sam Factor, the founder of Walter Picks, huge TikTok account right now. We'll be chatting it up. A great app there. So find us there. And also last call too for one last thumbs out on your way up. And of course, we're about, I think, 200 away from 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're watching on Twitter, thank you so much. If you don't mind just sneaking over, hitting that subscribe button, even if you want to watch it on Twitter still, help us boost that numbers, get the algorithm out to more people, all that good stuff. But again, rotostreetjournal.com is where you can find all of our great content and the fantasy fullback dive if you prefer it in audio. Thank you for listening, and reviews are always helpful on there as well. In a world full of fantasy sheep, be the wolf, guys. Later.